I started fast forwarding through the endless dialogue because so far, season 2 is so boring.
So now it's just back and forth bickering from two different locations.
Extremely boring and very bad acting.
Hey, what is up, people of the internet? Welcome back to another episode of Movies Good, Internet Bad, a celebration of cinema uploaded right here to the place that hates it the most, the internet. I'm Cory, that's Shane, and in this episode, we're halfway through season 2 of House of the Dragon, and we're sharing our thoughts. Shane, how are you, sir?
I'm good. House of the Dragon has also been pretty good.
Pretty good, in the words of Larry David, one might say, right?
Yeah, I'd give it a pretty good so
A
far.
pretty good. Okay, so put a pin in that because I want to ask you at the end of the conversation to compare this to the current Star Wars television
Oh
show that's
gosh.
airing right
Okay.
now.
All right.
Okay, I just want
Okay.
to create that little bit of perspective.
Okay.
If you like these videos, please go ahead and tap the like button, subscribe if you haven't already, tap that notification bell so that way you never miss a new video. To set the stage here, House of the Dragon is HBO's first Game of Thrones spin-off show. Game of Thrones had a little bit of a tumultuous ending with seasons 7 and 8. Wasn't necessarily well received by the general public. It seemed like maybe this was going to be a little bit of a gamble when the show first came out, but season 1 aired 2 years ago, and kind of took the world by storm. And everyone was like, "Oh my God, Game of Thrones, it's back!" So we're here talking about the extraordinarily messy Targaryen family. Season 2 debuted a couple weeks ago. The first 4 episodes have aired, so now we're completely caught up with what all the critics have seen as well, which is always nice. And to kind of set the stage for the second season, we had spoilers. Please, if you haven't watched this, run and hide.
Too many spoilers.
Come
Yeah.
back. 3, 2, 1. Okay, so we had a baby decapitated in the first episode. We had the Battle of the Ericks in the second episode. Rhaenyra snuck into King's Landing, which is not in the books, in episode 3. And then episode 4 was the Battle of Rook's Rest, which had some pretty insane action and finally delivered on that whole Dance of the Dragons promise that the show made for us. So, Shane, I will kick it off to you since I am as sick as the dog that gets kicked in the first episode of this season, and I'll let you do most of the heavy lifting. What's working for you?
That's a great segue.
That's why I get paid the host money.
Yeah, I mean, I remember seeing all the tweets after that episode where it's like, baby decapitated, don't care. They kicked the dog, I do care. That's
Come
the
on
worst
now.
thing they did in that episode. Yeah, so first off, I want to point out that neither of us have read the books.
That is
So
correct.
if you're coming onto this show looking for like a book versus film comparison, this is maybe not the right place for you. But we will speak to it on just the perspective of watching a show, which I think is also a different perspective, right? Because if you've read the source material for anything and then you watch it, you're constantly just comparing it. Whereas, like when you come into it with fresh eyes, you have a different perspective in general. I feel like that happens with another fantasy series, Lord of the Rings, right? Where I saw the movies before I read the books, and a lot of people saw the opposite. And I think a lot of book readers tend to love the extended editions of Lord of the Rings.
Mm-hmm.
I am one of those people that thinks that theatrical editions are better because they work better as films. And so I think that those dueling perspectives are
I'm
interesting
cautiously
to
nodding
observe.
while saying
Yeah, you prefer the
friend
extended, right?
will kill me if I agree with you on that. She's a book reader and she adores the extended editions.
Yeah.
She wants every ounce of that lore possible.
Yeah.
And like it's great that they both exist, in my opinion.
Yeah,
because
you can
there's
choose which to watch, right?
the films for someone like you, the extended editions for someone like her. I think that's fantastic. And television is really kind of the perfect medium for what they're doing with these book adaptations. We've always said, I really think this would work as a TV show when talking about a lot of this big genre stuff, because there's just not enough time to fit it into 2 or 2.5 hours. So I think they did 10 episodes last season and they've done 4 so far. So roughly 14 hours in, and all of these episodes have been 60 to 70 minutes in runtime. These are chonky boys. They're not Acolyte episodes by any stretch of the imagination. So what works?
Yeah,
what doesn't work?
I think the strongest part of the first season is also the strongest part of the second season, which is the character work. I like all of the dueling character work. You can clearly see their motivations. I think what separates this show, both in season one and two, from something like Game of Thrones, is in Game of Thrones there were a lot of dislikable characters and a lot of likable characters. And I feel like the likable characters, Jon Snow, etc., had very few faults. Whereas I feel like this is almost a little bit closer to like the Succession mold of things,
Interesting.
where everyone is kind of good and bad at the same time, right? I guess Rhaenyra would be the only one that like is generally on the side of good, but like everyone has their ups and downs, their character flaws
Sure.
throughout, and you kind of root for someone and hate them at the same time. Damon especially is the biggest one there. But all of these characters, like even Aegon the king, you kind of see moments of like some softness to him, and like
Especially in this season. We
yeah,
hadn't seen that in
yeah,
season one because he was a kid at that point.
yeah,
They hadn't done the time jumps or whatever, but you get to see him kind of going about his day to day as the king. And it's a
yeah,
very different view into that character than what we saw before.
yeah. And in I think it was episode two maybe where he's fielding the calls from
Mhm.
all of his constituents, and he's like, "No, I want to help these people." It's like, wait a minute, maybe you're not all bad, right? Uh,
The guy just wants his goats. That's it. Just get him
yeah,
his goats.
yeah.
Come on now.
It's interesting to see that duality of like, ruling strong versus, helping people, that kind of thing, right? And I think that's an interesting character. Aemon too is the same thing, right? Where
The skinniest man
he's
on television.
yes,
Good Lord.
he is
Jesus.
like this like demon character throughout the entire first season, and you don't feel bad for him at all, and then like you have these scenes where his brother's laughing at him for
Mhm.
in the brothel, right? And you kind of feel for him a little bit. And so it again, it reminds me so much of something like Succession, right? Where like Kendall Roy, where he's this awful guy, but like you kind of root for him at the same time. And I think that's the best part of the show, is finding those moments where these terrible people can actually be kind of good.
Yeah, and they're very much setting up the mirror imaging between Aemond and Daemon. So
Yes.
Daemon's in Harrenhal now, which
Yep.
is historically known for being a haunted castle, and he was chasing down what looked like Aemond in the last episode,
It's
but it just turned out
himself.
to be himself with an eye
It's
patch,
it's
which is
the Luke Skywalker under the Vader mask.
in the dark side cave.
Dagobah.
That's great.
Yeah.
Who's his Yoda? That's a certainly interesting question.
Yeah, I don't know.
Is it
Uh,
Laris, the foot guy?
yeah.
Foot guy.
Or it could be that witch lady that we just met.
Oh yeah, interesting. Kind of a Melisandre esque
Yeah, a little bit.
character, right? Um, yeah, I'm curious because that sort of segues into something that I haven't been too keen on, and it's the fact that Damon hasn't necessarily been sidelined in this season,
He's kind of been
but he's
sidelined.
off on his own arc,
Yeah.
right? And I don't really know, not having any prior book knowledge, where that arc is necessarily going to go.
Yeah.
And part of me is just like, all right, get on with this. Get him back with with Rhaenyra and her camp, and they're going to war. Like this is very clearly happening. You might want one of your best fighters with one of your bigger dragons to be there for that sort of thing. But
Yeah, you run into this issue a lot in television, actually, because there are certain plot lines that are not as long as other plot lines, and could be resolved in a couple of episodes, but the way that it's structured, you kind of have to extend it out so that they can hit a plot point later on. This happened in the most recent, I think it was the most recent season of Stranger Things with the Hopper storyline, where
yeah, the stuff
Hopper's
in Russia.
story just kept getting pushed out, but it needed to, because in the end it all converged together at the same point. And so I feel like this might be what's kind of happening with Damon, where it's like we just have to remind you guys that Damon is at Harrenhal, and he's gonna have a little moment each episode where he's moving forward slightly, but if you look at it in aggregate, it looks like not a lot has happened.
Right. But
So
by
I
the time
wonder
the
if
end of the season gets here,
yeah, I wonder if that's what's happening. here.
Yeah.
I don't know. I have not read the books,
I
as I
mean,
mentioned.
you're 100% right though. A lot of these writers' rooms for TV, they crack the story in reverse, right?
Yeah.
Like what is our destination,
Hmm.
and then how do we craft the journey to get there?
Yep.
And sometimes things get a little bit dicey, and they play a little fast and loose with the chronological stuff, or it seems like maybe Rhaenyra's plot is moving at breakneck speed and Damon's is moving almost in reverse, right? But by the
Yeah.
time you get to the end of that season, it should all converge and do something great.
Yeah, and I would also like I would say that about the war storyline in general. It seems like it's moving very fast.
Mhm.
Where it's, Kristen Cole just left and now it's like a whole war. It's like, oh, he just left 15 minutes of screen time ago. Like it's accelerating, and so you've got these plots moving at different speeds, and I think it can kind of throw off the pacing a little bit, but hopefully it'll all converge together. I would say the thing that I have sort of disliked in this season is there are a lot of good moments and plot points, but they use plot convenience a lot. So two examples. One is like the death of the baby, the beheading of the child,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
It strikes me as illogical that two random, I know that they're rat catchers, but like two random people can just like go up to the residents and do what they did with
Yeah.
nobody seemingly finding them. And I know that Kristen Cole was like getting it on and he was supposed to be protecting them, but like there's one guy protecting everyone.
Yeah.
It feels a little like they would be escorted through there, right? So that's where it's like,
One would imagine so,
yeah,
but yes.
they would have to have somebody monitoring them throughout, you would think. But uh, yeah, especially like during this wartime era,
Yep.
right? You gotta know, and I feel like that's where it breaks the logic of the character work just to provide us with this like shocking moment.
Huh.
So I
Well,
didn't love that. But this,
I guess a little bit the backbone of Game of Thrones, right, is shock and awe. That's kind of
yeah,
the
no, 100%. But
I guess I get it to a degree.
like in Game of Thrones, I feel like those shock and awe moments, they actually had a lot of clues leading up to them, and like they logically made sense. Red Wedding, stuff like that, right?
Sure, sure,
Like
sure.
you could see it coming a mile away, but you didn't think it would ever happen, and then it does, kind of thing. Whereas this one, it's just like, surprise, they're beheading the baby, and I guess they set it up with like hiring the people, but like it felt too easy. But I would also go on to say this, the exact same thing for two other plot points that you mentioned, which was the fight between the twins, and then Rhaenyra going to King's Landing, right?
Yep.
If you hired a twin and you knew that the other twin was, fighting for the other side, would nobody think of this idea? Like, like
No, they're not
maybe
smart
you
enough at this
find
point in
like a
history.
secret
Damn it,
code phrase or something that only this guy knows,
safe
right?
word.
Yeah, like it feels too easy. And so the same thing, they infiltrated the castle, it was too easy. And then they did it again with Rhaenyra going to King's Landing. Like, oh, there's this one place where the queen goes where nobody is around. It's
Mhm.
like, well, wouldn't that be the place to murder the queen? Like, if everyone knows this. So, yeah, again, where it's like, I know that the thought is like, oh, it's a religious place. Nothing bad could happen there. It's like, well,
Sure.
yeah, that'd be the one target.
Right.
Uh,
And historically in Game of Thrones, that is where bad stuff
yeah.
tends to happen. They blow up all of King's Landing.
Yeah.
Show.
And so that's really my issue is there's a lot of breaking of logic. You have to suspend your disbelief a little too much for these scenes that actually I think do work to happen. Like the fight is really well executed and earned, and that conversation between Alicent and Rhaenyra is very strong, but getting there just felt too easy.
It's fair. It's interesting you bring that up because it makes it tricky because the end result that you get to is in most cases largely satisfying.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I thought that conversation between Rhaenyra and Alicent in the Sept was as dynamic as anything else the show has done so
Agreed.
far. Lo and behold, I go online the next day.
Everyone hates it.
People fucking hated it
Yeah.
for some reason. I don't know why. It was
Yeah.
it was well shot. It was well acted. It was well written. Like I don't know, man. I guess it wasn't in the books.
No,
and
yeah, and
that's
that's
enough
immediate sacrilege to a lot
to
of
throw
people.
people
Yeah,
up in arms or
yeah,
whatever. But the blood and cheese stuff from the first episode was
I
also
guess
done
it was
very
done
differently
differently, right? Yeah,
from the books too. So, uh, you know, there comes a time when you're doing an adaptation where you can't just take the words that are on the page and put them on the screen.
agree.
It
Yep,
just doesn't always work, right?
yep,
There's a reason why the Harry Potter movies cut out so much stuff,
yep,
because when you're trying to cram all it into 2 hours, some stuff's got to go, right? Or
yep.
some stuff's got to change, or this or
HBO
that.
is apparently fixing this, but we'll see.
Yeah, we'll see. You and I have very differing
I'm
thoughts
not gonna
on
fade
that.
Mark Mylod, man. I'm just not gonna do it.
Mark Mylod is very good at what he does. I wish him nothing but the best of luck. I have zero interest in that Harry Potter show. Those 8 movies are about as close to perfect adaptations as
I agree.
I think exist, especially given the scope and scale that they're on blockbuster wise. The fact that they maintained 98.5% of that cast
Yeah,
throughout all 8 movies.
yeah.
It's like a miracle that
It
they
is a
even
miracle.
exist. But
Yeah,
but HBO's they're gonna try their damnedest, because
money.
in today's society we need to wring IP out
Yeah,
until it is bone dry. So
yeah,
um, so let's see. We talked about characters a little bit. I want to talk to you about direction, specifically the 3rd episode.
yeah.
And you
I
probably
know
know
where
where
you're
I'm going
going
with
with
this
this.
one.
I
But
absolutely do.
the director of the 3rd episode is Geeta Patel, who directed the 7th episode of last year's Ahsoka series. And when I saw that, I almost had like a small aneurysm, because I was like, there's no way, man. Like, that 3rd episode has that brilliant conversation at the end between your 2 leads, and I'm just sitting here thinking, well, look what happens when you have high production value and you have good scripts
Yeah,
and you hire a director, because all the directors on TV shows like this, they're kind of guns for hire,
yeah.
right? They come in, they do their
100%.
1 or 2 episodes, and then
Mhm.
they go off and they do their next thing.
Yep.
Unless they're the showrunner, then they stay hands-on throughout or whatever. But
Yep.
like, Geeta Patel came in and cooked up a great episode here, and then I saw the name and I looked her up on IMDb and I saw the Ahsoka episode, and I was like, there's no way.
Yeah.
And it just it makes me wonder, and I wanted to ask you this now that we're part of the way through the video. How would you compare what we're seeing from House of the Dragon right now to honestly just about anything that Star Wars is pumping out?
Yeah, I think with the exception of Andor, Andor's the only thing I think that could stand on any other streaming service and work. Yeah, it's interesting. I don't know where the disconnect is. And, at first I was like, well, maybe it's just because all the Filoni shows are on the volume, right? And these directors don't know how to deal with the volume, and that's what's causing the issues. And yeah, Ahsoka was largely volume and green screen, so I can kind of see that there. But then you move on to something like The Acolyte, and I feel like those are also relatively poorly directed as well. And so I don't know exactly what's going on. I don't know if it's the production schedules. I don't know if there's too many hands in the cookie jar going on with those shows, and not a lot of like firm direction. I don't know what's going on, because it feels like everything HBO does just looks supremely high quality.
How are
and
they
then
doing
you go over to Disney Plus with the exact same director and it looks like crap. It does not make any sense to me. I will say I'm glad that we get these directors on these shows so that they can really show off. But again, like, most of these episodes have a very similar look and feel, despite being a ton of different directors, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And so I think HBO's really nailed that production chain, maybe in a way that Disney cannot yet do.
Honestly, is there anyone else that can do it at the same level that they do? I mean,
No,
it's not TV; it's HBO after all.
Yeah,
so
it's no, it's Max, Corey. It's
oh
Max.
yes, I forgot the 3 letters that are synonymous with quality for the last
Max.
45 years. We're gonna shit can those in favor of calling something Max.
But yeah, let's. I think the other thing we have to talk about is obviously the biggest episode of the season just dropped with this. I forget I didn't look up the name of the episode, but was it Dance of Dragons? Was that the name?
Yeah, it's
Okay.
called the Dance of Dragons, or
Gotcha.
A Dance of Dragons,
Yeah.
or something like that. So
But yeah, obviously we had a big 3 dragon fight,
Yeah.
and a pretty big moment at the end. What did you think about that?
I'm curious because you know the adage in television, which is if it's not made 150 million% clear that somebody's dead, there is a chance they're not dead.
Yeah.
I think the most interesting thing for the story would be if King Aegon II is alive, but very, very badly injured.
Yeah.
And it throws, you know, King's Landing into disarray, right?
Yes, I agree.
I also thought it was a tremendous character moment for the Aemond character
Yep.
when he's on his knees and he points at Aegon with Aegon's dagger, almost kind of like, you shouldn't have come here, boy. This is my turf,
Yep.
kind of thing. Very, very interesting. And, you know, at the end of the day, Aemond is feared by a lot of people, but his bully, his skeleton in the closet, is his brother,
Yep.
right? And it always has been.
Yep.
So I thought that was a very interesting dynamic that he was the one that knocked him out of the sky. I also did some research and found out that Skyfire, who's Aegon's dragon, is not a war dragon. He's meant as like a show dragon, and he's supposed to just look pretty.
Didn't know that.
Why would you bring that to a giant battle?
Yeah.
I don't understand, but people do weird shit when they're drunk. And
Don't-
you know,
Don't
also
drink and dragon.
I loved the way that Rhaenys and Meleys met their end. You know, just the real soft, delicate look back from the dragon to her. They locked eyes. She like kind of strapped her harness in and was like, "We're going down together, dude." And like, you know, just a big blaze of glory moment. She knew when she went to that battle that there was most likely no return from that.
Yep.
I just thought it was really, really well executed. Directed by Alan Taylor, who directed Thor: The Dark World for those Marvel people in the world. One of the
Another example
Marvel movies, like again with Geeta Patel doing the Star Wars thing, and then coming doing this. And Alan Taylor directed episodes 1 and 4 of this season of House of the Dragon, and I thought he did a great job on both of them. What about you?
Yeah, I think this episode was structured very well, where you had that conversation. Well, first off, you have, Alicent trying to prove the Song of Ice and Fire story. I do think there's a little bit of a sour taste in everyone's mouths because it's like, that's the big moment, the Song of Ice and Fire, and then like we've seen Game of Thrones, and it doesn't end up being a very big moment. It's just like one little Winterfell battle and then it's over, kind of thing.
King Bran the Broken.
Yeah, gosh.
Woo!
all of this for Bran. But anyways, I think if you ignore that, it's a compelling setup, right? Another minor plot inconvenience is that Alicent leaves her little abortion potion thing out on the table, and Larys is like, I'm gonna put that in my little notebook. It's like, you were just trying to hide this, and then you're just gonna leave it there while inviting company?
I mean, he's gonna rub his feet on it.
Yeah, probably, right?
Sick.
But yeah, again, it's like illogical decisions from logical characters is weird, right? If she was notoriously an idiot, then sure, makes sense. But like, she's pretty smart and cunning. Why would she slip that up? Just so that Larys could find out? It felt too easy, right? But anyways, but I did love the conversation that she had with Aegon.
Yes.
She's just like, you don't need to do anything. Let us handle this. But like Aegon, he wants that acceptance. He wants to be somebody, right? And then you get that scene where he's just sitting there and he like knocks the thing off the table because he's like, I'm just bored. I want to be doing something. I don't want to be sitting here doing nothing. And then obviously he goes off and he gets cooked.
He writes his own demise to a degree. So
yeah. And I think that was a good setup, and I think Aemond clearly, lit him on fire on purpose. But I do think your idea is the most compelling of the options. So that's probably what's going to happen, is that he's not dead. He's just like Darth Vadered a little bit, and
he's not falling apart like a stop motion figure like his father was, but he's in a bad spot.
Well, that's what I was gonna say, is like the whole season 1 was his dad kind of unable to rule, and yet still kind of hanging on as everyone else is conspiring around him.
Yeah.
I feel like that's, it's a nice poetic thing, not unlike something that's happening in the real world today. I'm not going to go down that road.
Let's not go down that road.
But it's like poetry. It rhymes.
Thanks, George. What are you looking forward to? Because there's only 4 episodes left. It's a shorter season than last year, so they've got roughly 4 hours to tell the story they want to tell for season 2. What are you expecting and hoping for?
I think that war is going to continue. I do think that compelling sort of succession to Aegon is going to be probably the most interesting plot point of the season. I think eventually that battle will get to Harrenhal, and that's probably the ending point of the season, is some battle there. And Daemon, whatever. I'm assuming that since he had the dream that he's going to die there, that he will probably die there at some point in the story. Seems too set up.
Yeah, the weirwood trees tend to not lie.
Yeah,
as Game of Thrones has historically taught us. So
yeah, so I wonder, how that will unfold. But again, it's interesting, right? Like the King's Landing stuff is, to me, the most interesting, even though I tend to side with like Rhaenyra's side in general.
Sure.
I do think that like I have more fun watching Team. It's Green, right?
Yes, they're the Greens. The
Yes.
Blacks are on Dragonstone.
Team Green is more fun to watch than Team Black, but I root for Team Black more.
Well, yeah, Team Green is messy.
Yeah.
It's like watching the Jerry Springer show back in the day,
yeah.
right? Yeah. Or like you said earlier, it's like watching Succession, which is a 4-season long train wreck.
I love that show.
In slow motion. And it's fantastic. It's great. So, I would echo those sentiments. I think war is going to continue to progress. I'm thinking, hoping, wishing that we get one big, like penultimate episode Game of Thrones betrayal murder type thing that just kind of rips all of our hearts out.
Episode
and then
9.
we have
it
one episode left after that, right?
Yep.
To just kind of stew in it, which is what they used to excel at so well.
Yep.
So, but yeah, I'm highly enjoying it. It looks good. It sounds good. They shoot on location for a lot of stuff. Production value is high. I'm sure it has a lower budget than most of the other shows that are in its league or whatever. And HBO's onto something. I think they got themselves a big hit here. So,
agreed. Yeah, I'm excited to keep watching.
Cool. Well, let's go ahead and wrap this one up so we can go ahead and record our next one for this week, because boy, The Acolyte came out and
we have things to say.
There are things we have to talk about. So if you enjoyed this video, please go ahead and click that like button. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Click that notification bell so that way you don't miss anything new. Until next time, we'll see you guys in the next one.